We finally got to see some Borderlands 3 gameplay, and we were able to get access to the big Borderlands 3 event that happened, and we've learned a lot about new things that make it different from Borderlands 2. So here we are talking Borderlands 3 versus Borderlands 2 and the 10 biggest changes. And just a heads up, we're mostly just comparing it to Borderlands 2 because it was a main numbered entry in the series. Starting off with number 10, the movement and gunplay in Borderlands 3 is vastly improved over its predecessors. We played the game for about 3 hours with an Xbox One controller. Everything felt snappy and responsive, and it felt like how a very good modern FPS game should. It definitely feels faster than previous games in the series, and the recharge times mean you always have some tool at your disposal, which is great considering the new enemy types they keep throwing at you, forcing you to reconsider how you approach combat. There's definitely some weirdness mapping-wise, as switching firing modes require you to hit down on the D-pad, which can kind of be a bit of a pain when you're in a firefight and you need that thumb to control your movement, but other than that, it controls better than any game in the series ever has, and we can only imagine things are even more intuitive while using a mouse and keyboard, it being an FPS at all. If you go back and play Borderlands 2 right now, it's not as snappy or refined as you remember, but with Borderlands 3, you feel that snappiness and you feel that change. Next up, at number 9, you've probably seen a bunch of streamers talking about this on Twitch or Twitter, but if not, here's the deal. With Borderlands 3, Gearbox and 2K are rolling out the new Vault Insider program, and it's a rewards program essentially, that gives registered users in-game stuff for checking out Borderlands 3 content. Basically, it's like a more involved version of what Microsoft has been doing with Mixer and Xbox Live, where when you watch the streams, like inside Xbox, you get in-game items for Microsoft games. It's the same kind of basic idea here, except it covers stuff like articles and social media stuff instead of just streaming video, and will give users stuff like in-game chest keys, loot, and skins. It's definitely not for everyone, given it requires both a Vault Insider login and a Shift account login. But for people who are super into Borderlands and want as much stuff as possible, we can definitely see this being desirable, especially since those people are going to be checking that stuff out anyway. And moving on to number 8. Okay, so there's a bunch of smaller things that we want to mention that definitely aren't big enough to make their own points, but we still want you to know about. For starters, there's a whole new elemental damage type, radiation. They only showed it by there being exploding barrels, but if they follow the same logic that every other game does, there are bound to be radiation weapons somewhere in there. Irradiated enemies suffer health decay like any status element, with the added bonus of having the possibility of straight up exploding on death, creating an area of effect that can radiate other enemies, which is a cool addition. Another cool little addition comes in the form of a sort of lost and found box on your ship, the Sanctuary 3. This box functions a lot like the Postmaster does in Destiny, if you've ever played that. Loot that gets lost, be it dropped off of a cliff, down a hole, whatever it may be, will show up in this box on your ship. That way you're not just shit out of luck. It's definitely a welcome addition because I can't tell you how many cool guns I've lost that way over the years. These are just a couple of things, but they're still interesting enough to point out because, man, do they just make the overall experience that much nicer. Coming in at number 7, Borderlands takes place after the events of all the previous games, including Telltale's Tales from the Borderlands, and as such has a lot of returning faces, like Reese, Lilith, Hammerlock, and a bunch of other fan favorites. This time around, you're teamed up with Lilith and the Crimson Raiders in a battle against the Calypso Twins and the Children of the Vault cult, Troy and Tyreen, who are both galactic villains and made to come off as the douchiest Twitch streamers you've ever seen. They're able to steal the powers of the Vault monsters and want to use that for their own nefarious gain, so now it's up to you and the rest to race around the galaxy to find different vaults before the twins do and stop their evil plans. There's also a bunch of other stuff going on, such as the corporate war between Atlas, run by a non-Troy Bakered Reese from Tales from the Borderlands, trying to fend off a militaristic hostile takeover by the Malawan Corporation, and much of what we played was in the service of aiding Reese and Atlas on Promethea and the city planet from the trailer. The storytelling and character interactions were legitimately funny at times, and it'll be very interesting to see if they actually manage to do something cool with the twins, or if they just try and make Handsome Jack 2.0. But as we like to say around here, only time will tell. Moving on to number 6, so a lot of Borderlands 3 changes are little quality of life things, and one of the biggest quality of life changes by far is the ability to vault and mantle up onto objects in the environment. There were very few things in the first 3 games that sucked as much as just barely missing a jump or not being able to get the height needed to take a shortcut or maneuver in a combat scenario, and having to walk all the way around. It just broke up the flow of the game and felt awkward and weird. Now you can just walk towards an object or a ledge and your character will instinctively just jump up on the ledge, which is great not only for traversal and stuff like that, but it's a nice sense of verticality to the combat. Like, you can really turn the tides in a firefight now that you can quickly scale up something and get the high ground and rain death down from above, or even use it to maneuver through the environment and get the drop on some enemies who haven't seen you yet. It's definitely a welcome addition. Moving on to number 5, quick, this one's really short. While we're on the topic of mobility, you can slide now, and it actually works really well for Borderlands. It's not unique to the game by a long shot, but being able to sprint to a corner where an enemy's behind cover, hit B to initiate a slide, and then just blow them away with an energy shotgun is super satisfying. And we definitely wanted to mention it because it feels like way more of a quality of life improvement than you'd think. Coming in at number 4, every looter shooter needs a social space and a home base, and Borderlands 3 is no different. This time around, it comes in the form of Sanctuary 3, your spaceship and base of operations for vault hunting across the galaxy. It has everything you would expect from the main base of a game like this. So it'll serve as the home to most of your vendors and NPCs. For example, Marcus is there and he has guns and stuff to sell you, as well as a firing range. Moxie is there doing her usual thing. Hammerlock has a trophy room where you can see various trophies from creatures and enemies you killed, as well as a player quarters where you can put your guns and other stuff from your travels on display. In previous games, areas like Borderlands 2's Sanctuary only served as a hub for you to buy and sell and just hang around. Sanctuary 3 also serves as your mode of transportation throughout the galaxy, which, I mean, you know, it makes sense, it's a spaceship, and you can jump from planet to planet in your hunt for the vaults. It's worth noting that after going to a planet and finishing your business there, you can still go back to previous planets and areas to find new stuff and do side quests and all of that fun stuff. Next, at number 3, a lot of criticism about past Borderlands has been that while they did in fact have the bajillion guns that they were advertising, so many of them felt samey and the variety really wasn't there. A shotgun was a shotgun. And sure, maybe one gun had a higher fire rate or did elemental damage, but they pretty much all functioned the same for the most part, and it was hard finding actual unique weapons. Borderlands 3 tries to remedy this by giving the majority of the guns some sort of alternate firing mode, which is great not only for variety, but you can also approach combat differently and really switch up your attack style on the fly, since changing firing modes is as simple as hitting another button. In the big reveal, we saw stuff like a handgun that fired regular bullets, but would then switch over to firing mini missiles, which did explosive area effect damage, as well as a really cool Atlas Corporation shotgun that had a shield built in. And in our own gameplay experience, we saw other stuff like a high-tech shotgun which can change elemental types, and an SMG that had both a full auto mode with a red dot sight, good for on-the-fly running gun stuff, which could then instantly be switched over to a burst fire mode which snaps a scope onto it, making it more viable for longer range combat and pulling off headshots and enemies hiding behind cover. The developers also made a cool change to the disposable guns that you would literally pick up and throw away once a clip was expended, giving a lot of them unique effects, like bouncing around the area and exploding, and this is also where the whole guns with legs things from the announcement trailer comes in, and it'll just run around like a turret and shoot shit. It's really cool, and I'm hoping they end up having a lot of variety because what we've seen so far has been promising. And at number 2, one of the biggest problems in previous Borderlands games was surrounding loot drops. You'd be playing co-op with some friends who were either higher or lower level than you, and the higher level players would just burn through all of the mobs and ads, and you'd just steamroll through the levels. Borderlands 3 had a new default mode called Instant Loot, which, as you probably infer from the name, instances pretty much everything to scale to each individual player. A level 25 and a level 5 player can play together, and they'd see the same guns in world, but the stats and whatnot for those guns would be specifically tailored to each particular player. This fixes the problem of playing with under-leveled or over-leveled friends and just getting a bunch of useless loot you can't get because of level restrictions or for just being weak trash. Another big aspect of it is that those guns exist for everyone, which means that finally you don't have to worry about loot ninjas just grabbing everything and leaving everyone else just out in the cold without any rewards. That said, if you do want that old experience where loot and gameplay doesn't scale and one person can screw you out of loot, they're including a classic mode loot option that just makes everything the way it was in previous games. But like, why would you do that to yourself? I wouldn't. This is a huge difference from Borderlands 1 and 2 and pre-sequel, and it's something that was always super annoying, so it's nice to see Gearbox fix it. Finally, at number 1, the initial gameplay revealed included 2 of the new Vault Hunters, Amara the Siren and Zane the Operative. Amara has a lot of what you would expect from a Siren and has a few cool action skills that you can use to just absolutely wreck dudes in combat. The coolest of which being a heavy ground pound with an elemental area of effect that's very similar to the Titan ground pound from Destiny 2, right down to it pulling out the camera to a behind the back perspective to show you the action from a bird's eye view. Zane is billed as being able to give you a mix of a soldier, a hunter, and an assassin, and is the only playable character to be able to map 2 active abilities at once, which means he's a general jack-of-all-trades character that can be super viable in a variety of combat scenarios. I don't know about you, but I think the Vault Hunters we have to choose from in Borderlands 3 are probably some of the coolest ones we've seen since the first Borderlands, and I can't wait to jump into this game and just give them all a shot. Not much to compare here. Every new game has new characters with new abilities, so this was expected, and these new characters seem really cool. And those are the 10 biggest changes from Borderlands 2 to Borderlands 3. But we want to hear from you, so meet us down in the comments below and let us know what you think. What was the coolest thing you saw at the Borderlands 3 event, and will you be picking this game up on day 1? I know I will. As I'm sure you already know, hitting that like button really helps us out, and if you're new here, subscribing is a good idea because we put out videos like this every single day. As always, thank you for stopping by to hang out with us. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.